This is video 2 for the slide presentation called What Does College and Career Readiness Mean? And we're going to review what we covered in the first video and also cover a slide that I accidentally skipped over. So we said that college and career readiness means that we gain the knowledge and skills and dispositions necessary for college and career without remediation, which means without extra help or materials made easier for you. Okay, so which knowledge, skills, and dispositions should adult education students learn for college and career readiness? I skipped this slide in the first video, but here is where it talks about the U.S. Department of Education, the Office of Vocational and Adult Education. They use the college and career readiness standards for adult education to say what students in adult education need to study and learn for college and career readiness. So over here on the left, you see a picture of the actual booklet that has the standards, or in this case, it's an online book. And it lists all of the things that you're supposed to learn for college and career readiness. So we're just going to cover the ELA, or the English Language Arts standards. Okay, and so here's where they delineate all of the different kinds of texts and writing and speaking and listening that you should be doing, which we talked about last time. So if we go to the next slide, we talked about all the different types of reading that the college and career readiness standards say we should be covering. We talked about informational texts like newspaper articles. We talked about literature like fictional novels. We talked about science documents, and we talked about historical documents. We also talked about the kinds of writing that you should be doing, like writing stories and essays, like writing for science or social sciences, or like writing for your professional environment using emails and memos, etc. And then you were supposed to close out this video and click on the assignment number 1 or activity number 1 and tell me all about some types of writing that you've had to use at work or when interacting in a business situation. So we're going to move on from here. What are the college and career readiness standards? So the U.S. Department of Education, Office of Vocational and Adult Education, has created a list of skills adults should learn to be successful in college and career. And these are the ones that are for ELA, English Language Arts. There are also ones for mathematics. So here are the 6 standards. First, reading standards. So they have set up some specific things that students should learn in the reading category. They have writing standards, speaking standards, listening standards, language standards like grammar and rules for the use of the English language, and finally, reading foundations, like being able to pronounce words you don't know by splitting them up into syllables or sounding them out. So we're going to start with the reading standards. So there's quite a lot of them. I feel like they got really zealous when they started their standards, and then they just kept getting smaller and smaller as they went down the line as far as how many they had per category. So it's kind of funny. You'll notice that the numbers number of things for each category gets smaller as the slides go on. But here are the reading standards. They want you to cite evidence from your reading to support a conclusion. So in other words, when you're reading, you should be able to go back and use a quote from your reading in order to support some kind of argument or conclusion that you would like to make or present. So cite means to quote or paraphrase from the source that you've read. The next one is analyze the main idea or theme and summarize the key points. And this just means when you're reading like a story or an article or an essay, you have the ability to identify what the main point of that piece of writing is. Next, analyze how events and ideas develop in a text. So in other words, especially with stories, you have, the characters and the setting in the beginning, and those characters and characters, they don't stay the same throughout the entire story. They change over time, depending on what they go through or what happens to them. And they develop. And so analyze means to look at how they've changed and why. What has made them change? Okay, so that is an analysis of how events or ideas or people develop throughout the course of a text. Next, analyze word choices in shaping meaning or tone. So a lot of you who had me last year, we read some spine tinglers, meaning scary stories. And the authors used words that were scary, like dark or echoey or cold. Okay, so authors purposely use words to impart the meaning or the tone that they are going for with their story or their piece of writing. Next, analyze text structure. So, I'm sorry, I'm having troubles. Okay, here we go. Analyze text structure in shaping meaning. So this just means that authors also sometimes use the way that they structure their writing to help with the meaning. So for example, if they had an exclamation that a character was making and they wanted it to be extremely impactful, they might put that exclamation all by itself on the page. They would have a paragraph up here and then one line with the exclamation and then another paragraph. And it just makes that stand out on the page and impact the reader in that way. Okay, next thing, analyze point of view or purpose in shaping meaning. So point of view means the person who is making the point, what's the point of view? Are they narrating a story? Are they telling you something firsthand, first person from their personal perspective? Are they speaking of something in third person, telling the story of someone else? So all of these things, these choices that authors make, contribute to the way that the story comes across to the reader. First person point of view might seem a lot more personal, meaning you're telling it from your own words, from your direct experience. And that's how point of view can change the feeling of a piece of writing. Okay, next, evaluate various formats of writing. So they're saying that writing comes in different forms and it looks different. For example, right now we're looking at writing presented in a graphic, right? So we have reading standards in the center and these arrows pointing out to all of the different reading standards. So this is a very visual and graphic way of reading. But all of this information could also be presented in a paragraph, which would be probably a lot more boring and, less clear and easy to understand. But writing does come in different formats. And they're saying to evaluate those various formats of writing. So for my purposes today, how would you evaluate the format of my writing? Is this helpful to have it presented in a graphic and visual form this way? I thought it would be, and that's why I used it. I wanted to make it easier to understand. So that would be your job, to evaluate how things are presented in writing, the format that they're presented in. Next, evaluate reasoning and evidence in a text. Okay, that just means what argument or reasoning is the author of the writing using? And does it seem like they used good sources for backing up their reasoning? Does their reasoning make sense? Did they use good sources to back up their reasoning? We have to, not every writer is going to tell you the truth. They're going to maybe argue a point that has no validity, and they might use some reasoning or evidence that's faulty. In other words, it's not real. It's not something backed by logic. It's not something backed by science. It's not something backed by reality, things, what people actually do in real life. So you definitely have to be critical when reading and make sure that you don't believe everything you read. Next, compare two texts' approach to the same topic. So oftentimes, especially when we're maybe researching a topic that we're interested in writing about, we might look up many different texts on the same topic, and it might be interesting to compare the differences in those two texts. For example, maybe you're going to review a movie and you're going to talk about other reviews about that movie. And you might have one really good review and you might have one really bad review. And you might want to compare those two for your listeners or readers. So you would read both of those and you would compare them. Well, this movie reviewer said that the graphics in the movie were not very good and not very believable. But maybe the other reviewer said that while the graphics weren't the greatest, the storyline was really excellent. Okay, so when you compare those two reviews, it gives a good picture of what the movie is like in your review. And lastly, understand complex text. So this is one of the biggest ones that I think is going to be important for you as a class, because you are still working on raising your level of reading. And you're going to encounter complex texts that you don't understand, or that are filled with lots of vocabulary that you're not familiar with. So this doesn't mean that you're not ready for college. It just means you need to come up with some tactics or strategies for how to tackle complex texts. And it can be done. It's just more time consuming, but it doesn't mean that you're not ready for college. When you're ready for college, you have all of the skills necessary to tackle the information that is going to be given to you by a college professor. And even if they give to you a complex text that's very difficult for you and you are having a hard time understanding it, it doesn't mean that you can't figure it out. And so that's really one of the points of this class, is to help you understand ways to figure out texts that are very hard for you. Okay, so this takes us to activity 2, which is practice analytical reading. So since these were the reading standards, I wanted you to practice some reading skills. So if you notice, there's a big red paragraph here, and I would like you to read this paragraph and then answer the 4 questions below. There'll be a copy of this particular page on a separate tab that you can click on and fill out. And if you'd like to, you can open the copy of the whole slide presentation and open it up in a window right next to this if you'd like to. But for now, I'm just going to read this and walk you through what you need to write for the answers of these 4 questions. So here's a paragraph. It says, people who consume sugary drinks regularly, 1 to 2 cans a day or more, have a 26% greater risk of developing type 2 diabetes than people who rarely have such drinks. According to www.hsph.harvard.edu. While some say that personal choice and not availability of sugary drinks is the problem, I say that reducing the availability of sugary drinks in public institutions is a start in sending the message that sugary drinks are unhealthy. The fact is that sweet beverages increase diabetes risk because the body digests sugar quickly, which leads to blood sugar spikes that are very detrimental to the body's organs and can lead to health problems and early death. Here are some facts about diabetes in our country. More than 34 million people in the United States have diabetes. Diabetes is the 7th leading cause of death in the United States. The number of adults diagnosed with diabetes has more than doubled in the last 20 years, and the cost of all types of diagnosed diabetes in the United States was $327 billion in 2017, and that came from www.healthline.com. This disease has become a huge economic and public health problem. With this knowledge widely available, it is clear that public institutions have a responsibility to the citizens of our country to join the fight against diabetes by not offering these kinds of beverages that have been shown to contribute largely to this problem. Even if people can easily get sugary drinks in other places, at least our public institutions will be modeling healthier choices to its citizens. Okay, so that was obviously a paragraph that talked about diabetes and made an argument. So it says, what is the main idea or argument of this paragraph? So usually you can find a main idea or argument of a paragraph either in the first or second sentence or in the last sentence of the paragraph, because introductory sentences often have something surprising. It's the hook that draws you in. So this paragraph, it started with a quote. And it said people who consume sugary drinks have a 26% greater risk of developing type 2 diabetes. That's pretty high. That's almost 30%. So that was a shocking statistic. So then I think that's the hook. So I think the argument is going to come next in the second sentence. While some say that personal choice and not availability of sugary drinks is the problem, I say, so here we go. I say, that's a clue, right? I am saying what I think. Okay? So right there in that sentence is going to be the main idea or argument of this paragraph. Number 2, what evidence is cited to support the argument? Okay, so there are a lot of facts in this paragraph, and that's the evidence that this author is using to support the argument. Okay, so there's many facts, and you can list them. You don't have to write them out in their entirety. You could, well, the first one is right here. People who drink sugary drinks have a 26% greater risk of getting diabetes. Okay, so you want to shorten it, right? So don't write out the whole sentences. Try to shorten the facts that are stated. Okay, so that's what you're going to write here. What evidence is stated to support the argument? That means what facts does the author give? Oops, sorry. Okay, what sources is the evidence cited from? So they're in two places in this article. It lists the sources, so you need to find them. They're both online sources and write them here. And finally, what reasoning does the author give for the argument that public institutions should not offer sugary drinks? I made a typographical error here. It should be offer, not offering. When people can get them other places anyway. So in other words, what difference does it make if a public institution offers sugary drinks or not? People can get them whenever they want. They can get them at the grocery store. They can get them at a restaurant. They can get them from vending machines, not in public institutions, if public institutions were to follow this rule. So why does the author say, what's the argument? What's the reasoning? Why argue for public institutions to not offer sugary drinks when sugary drinks are available everywhere? You can get them. Is it really going to stop people from drinking them? So what's this author's argument? Okay, so why should public institutions not offer sugary drinks? When we say public institutions, we mean places like schools, libraries, police stations, fire stations, anything that is paid for by the government where people can go and buy food and drinks, okay? Public hospitals, those types of institutions, anything owned by the government. There are lots of places, government offices, so many. Okay, so now I would like you to stop this video and click on the Activity 2 tab that I've attached to this assignment and go in and answer these questions.